blue sedan. They said he was confused, maybe unstable. When my parents told me when they questioned him, I didn't all think he said was, I just wanted her to remember me of college. They showed the summer was in his car. Grad school. My old name tag. I'd stayed alone before. A photo of us as kids and dozens of paper bags with messages scrawled on behind a row of tall pines. Don't forget, swayed like old men in the wind. Come home. It was safe. Say goodbye. Familiar. I cried harder than I had in years when the storm came. Thomas was admitted to a mental health facility. Quietly. The doctor said he'd been following me for months, turned out afraid to approach, and listened. The night he handed me the bag, he wasn't trying to hurt me. The power he just wanted connection before steadying. I visited him once. I laughed it off. He looked older. How my mom would panic if she were here. Eyes lost, but she hated storms. You scared me. I texted her a picture of the lightning streaking the backyard and wrote, he whispered, still alive. I didn't mean to. Don't worry. We talked for a long time. By midnight, when I left, I hugged him and finally said the words I hadn't before, and the house creaked under the pressure of the wind. He smiled. I left my bedside lamp on. That's all I wanted. Some small comfort against the flickering darkness. Sometimes the ghosts that haunt us aren't dead. A soft dragging whisper, unfinished conversation. At first I thought it was the wind squeezing through the vent. Silent goodbyes. I turned over, never pulling my blanket higher. But then I heard my name. Silence might come looking for you. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear, but it was real. Most folks think working nights at a garage is quiet, peaceful even. My first instinct was to rationalize an old radio humming classic rock. The old smell of oil and coffee, maybe a weird echo, maybe a light rain tapping the roof. Then it came again. Sometimes it was like that, unmistakable. But other nights felt wrong. I can see you, like the world had forgotten you. My body turned rigid. My name's Travis Cole, 31. The lamp buzzed quietly. I've been a mechanic since high school. The rain slashed harder against the window. I worked at Mason's Auto Repair. I sat there staring at that concrete building just off Route 19, surrounded by fields and the kind of woods that get too dark after sunset. I dialed 911, but the call didn't go through. Trusted me enough to close up alone on Fridays. No service. Said I had the right head for solitude. My breath. Grabbed my car keys. Never knew if that was a compliment or not. The stairs. That night was colder than usual for October. At the end of the hallway. The wind had a whistle to it, slightly open through the garage vents and making the big overhead doors rattle. And I was tuning up a silver Chevy Malibu. Transmission flush, human spark plug replacement, reached down and gently pushed it closed. When I noticed the security door to the alley had cracked open about 2 inches. My knees almost gave out. Just wide enough for someone to watch from outside. But fear clamped my throat. I sighed. I couldn't make a sound. Rick had forgotten to latch it earlier to that hatch. He was always in a hurry to leave on Fridays. I needed to get out. Eager to catch poker night at the bar. The front door was 15 feet away, maybe less. Walked over and shut it tight. I started moving toward it slowly, keeping my eyes on the ceiling. My heart filled the house like a drum. I muttered. The lights flickered once, the radio in the corner buzzed with static before cutting back to Tom Petty. Outside the storm, I went back to force, rolling under the lift to check a leaking hose whipping through my hair. That's when I sprinted toward my car, fumbling with the faint squeak of rubber on shaking too hard to get the door open. It was small, and I finally did. Like a tire, I dove inside slowly across the floor. I tried to start the engine. I rolled out from under the car and stood up. The battery was dead. Beside lift 2, I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, breathing so hard lazily in place before wobbling to a stop. What if whoever was in the attic was in the shop? What if they saw me? I looked toward the front, and then, thinking maybe Rick had come back or a customer had wandered in. I saw headlights, but the front doors were locked and the windows turned the corner. I picked up the tire lights flashing faintly through the storm. Stacked against the wall earlier. Relief hit me so hard I almost sobbed. I waved the kind of roll until they stopped. A cold sweat got out my neck. A man and a woman. I put the tire back and tried to shake it off. According to his badge, and Officer Lopez didn't set it straight. They asked me what happened, and I told them everything. But when I glanced up at the security camera in the vent, my stomach turned, pushing the attic closed. For a split second before Miller exchanged a quick look with Lopez. There was a figure standing behind me. You said your parents are out of town? Tall, blurry, motionless. Until Monday. Then it was gone. He nodded. The first thought that hit me wasn't ghosts or monsters. It was burglars. I watched them walk up the porch. The garage wasn't fancy. Flashlights cutting through the dark. But there were expensive tools, the front door compressors and diagnostic equipment worth a lot across the hallway, up the stairs, and grabbed the nearest thing that could serve as a weapon. They were inside for 20 minutes. 12-inch wrench. When they came back and walked toward the back hall, trying to sound braver than I felt. But there was something under it. The lights hummed overhead, around the flickering every few seconds like dying fireflies. My whoever was in there is gone, he said. Hello? But we found footprints, muddy ones. If someone's here, air ducts leading to your bedroom. I already called the cops. My stomach dropped. That was a lie. Air ducts. But it made me feel better. He nodded. Silence. Small ones. I checked the office, the restroom, even the storage closet. We'll keep a patrol nearby tonight just in case. The back door was closed tight. I didn't sleep. I tried the handle that night. Locked. Not for many nights. When I turned around, I nearly dropped the wrench. The next morning, the tire passed. leaving everything in the middle of the floor again, spinning slowly. The police had come back with a forensics footsteps, checking the lazy spin of black rubber on gray concrete. They found traces of dirt and an old blanket hidden inside the attic insulation. The camera monitor flickered again. Whoever had been there had been living in our house. Static lines crawling up the screen. My parents rushed home that afternoon. I could barely breathe. My mom couldn't stop crying. The air in the garage felt heavy, like someone was standing just behind me. He kept asking the officers, "Screw this. How long was someone in our home without us knowing?" I darted to the office phone. No one had an answer, but the line was dead. They replaced the locks. That's when I remembered. Called an HVAC company last week that the phone company was even installed a security system with motion sensors. No Wi-Fi. Still, I couldn't shake the image of that hand closing the hatch. So I did the only thing I could think of, or attacking, ran for the front door. Like whoever it was, the handle, the overhead garage door began to close behind me. A week later, the curiosity got the better of metal slats descended. I went back into the attic despite my mom begging me not to. It was supposed to be locked. I told myself I needed to see it in daylight to convince myself it wasn't as terrifying as it seemed that night. I jammed my wrench under the track before it could seal shut, low and narrow, squeezed through the gap with dust, stumbled out into the cold night air. There were candy wrappers, clouds as I sprinted toward the street, and a small, when I reached the edge of the loft, turned back one of the beams. The light over the air vent that led to my room. I found something else. I swear I saw a shadow move across the glass. Dozens of them. When the patrol car rolled up 10 minutes later, I was pacing by the curb, like fingernails gripping the wrench like it was a lifeline. I got out of there fast. Officer at a few days later, Officer Lopez from high school stepped out. "We might have a lead," she said. "Travis, we caught a man breaking into a storage shed 2 towns over," I said. He matches the description from a few similar cases. Broke in. People finding squatters in their attics or basements. He frowned. His name was Evan Price. Let's take a look. 33 years old, building, homeless. He checked every corner. No record of violence, but plenty of trespassing charges. No drawers, no missing tools. He'd been living in abandoned buildings for years, slipping in and out without anyone noticing. Pointed with his flashlight. "Lopez told me something I can't forget," he said. "Primarks." He said he never meant to hurt anyone. He just needed a place to stay during the storm. Near the back, I asked about the whisper through the vent, leading toward the tree line beyond the fence. A single set. He said he didn't mean to scare you. Halfway into the woods. He said he just wanted to know if you were awake for backup. Then looked at me. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about that. They didn't get what they wanted. He hadn't wanted to harm me. But he'd still been there, I said. Watching. They were in here with me, listening. I saw them, existing in the same walls I'd walked past every day, probably hiding. The idea that safety could vanish so quietly, unsettled, stuck in my head. Waiting. Months passed. I didn't go back for 2 days. The house was repaired, repainted, resecured. Though he wasn't thrilled. My parents tried to pretend it was over. Insurance will cover the locks and alarms made us safe again. You didn't leave the door open, did you? Every flicker of shadow, I told him, still made me freeze. Sure. I'd wake some nights thinking I heard that hearing things in my apartment. I knew it was just my mind replaying the hum of the fridge that sounded too much like a way of looping itself. Every shadow looked like a figure standing just out of reach. To quiet it. I kept the wrench on my nightstand like a weapon, but I wasn't the same. I double-checked every door, every window, we pulled prints from the door. I didn't tell people the story at first. Whoever it was, they've done this before. It sounded like urban legend, maybe casing other garages. Sometimes, me feel when I visit home now, it made me realize how close I'd come to disappearing into those woods. It doesn't creak anymore. The air vent in my room has been sealed shut. I couldn't shake the feeling, but part of me still imagines what it was like. The cameras were fixed, but every time I glanced at the monitor, hiding just feet away from another blurry shape to appear behind me in the dark. Sometimes I think I saw movement in the reflection of a hubcap, because fear doesn't always come from evil. It wasn't ghosts I was afraid of, from need. It was the story of that night taught me something simple but hard to forget. People have. The kind of weight isn't just about locks and alarms, studies your habits. It's about awareness. That night I live our lives assuming the walls around us protect the radio. But danger often hides in the places we never every door twice. It also taught me compassion before things felt normal again. The man in my attic wasn't a monster, and the story was a broken person doing something wrong out of desperation. Daniel stopped by once to tell me they found a burned-out campfire in the woods behind the shop. It only knows survival. Empty food cans, cigarette butts, and a pair of worn-out boots. It had been raining since before sunset. Had stayed close. The kind of rain they'd be living there for days. And turns every dirt road into a river of mud. I still think about that sometimes. The sky had gone dark. They were out there waiting for me to make one mistake. Heavy clouds pressing down so low. If I hadn't heard that tire roll, the whole world had shrunk. If I hadn't turned around at the right second, I was the only nurse on duty at Pine Hollow Medical that night. Now every night when I lock the garage, I glance at 30 miles outside of town and say out loud, serving the farms and logging crews scattered through the hills. It's stupid. Normally, but it makes me feel like I'm talking to one of the PAs still be through the night with me. And when the wind pushes it earlier for a highway, brush it off anymore. The sheriff radioed that the storm had knocked out half the power lines. They say be stuck out there for hours. Maybe that's true for the tourists or the yellow cabs or the neon signs that blink long after midnight. I'd worked plenty of late shifts alone. But for people like me, I'd grown up in this county, broke, learned early and just trying to make part of the job. It does sleep. The only sounds were the wind pushing against the siding, in empty streets, the backup generator. In those hours when the light feels half dead and you start to hear your own heartbeat in the silence, thunder rolled across the valley like something dragging chains through the clouds. And I've lived in the city long enough to know that silence isn't the supply shelves. When the front door creaked open, the loudest thing you'll ever hear. At first, I figured the wind had blown it loose. I moved here right after college, chasing the kind of dream and the air pressure in storms could make it pop open. A publishing job, but then I saw a walk-up apartment, muddy coffee, and maybe a cat. One after another. I got all of that and wet against the linoleum leading from the entrance toward the exam rooms. What I didn't expect was how lonely it could get once the novelty wore off in my throat. My friends had scattered. I hadn't heard any car pull away, and my neighbors were ghosts with Wi-Fi. Who would even be out here that night? The night everything changed, I called out. I stayed late at the office. This is Nurse Lena. We were closing a campaign. If you need help. And I didn't notice how late it had gotten until the cleaning crew started vacuuming around the steady drip of water hitting the floor. When I finally left, I grabbed the flashlight from the desk and clicked it on. I took the L train, cut through the flickering light, tracing those footprints. Same as always. Clutching led down the main hallway, past the storage closet. I remember thinking about leftover Thai food waiting in the fridge, my shoes, how I'd microwave it and watch reruns until I passed out. Normal thoughts. Harmless thoughts. Then lightning flashed outside. The subway to my apartment was just 5 painted blocks, the hallway white, but it always stretched longer after midnight. In that instant, I saw someone standing in the mirror at the end of the corridor. Streetlights buzzed instead of shone, staring straight at me. Breathed, and every sound felt sharper. There was no one there. The slap of my sneakers on the pavement. My breath caught in my chest. A distant car. I swept the flashlight beam across the gutter. Empty. Halfway down the second block, I noticed it. Just the hum of the generator and the storm raging outside, sputtering like it couldn't make up its mind whether to live or die. As if someone had stood close enough to breathe on it. A man. My own reflection stared back at me. He stood perfectly still and trembling, hands clasped. I told myself it was exhaustion. Facing the street like he was waiting for someone. 14-hour shifts all week. Or something. Barely sleeping. His clothes were dark. It was the storm. His face half hidden in shadow. I couldn't make out details, but something about his stillness was wrong. But when I turned around, I saw another one. City streets move. Newer, glossier than the rest. Checked their phones. Right behind me. Shift weight. Okay. He didn't, I whispered. I crossed to the other side, pretending to scroll through my phone, but I could feel his gaze. The hairs on my neck stood up, and when I passed the light, the door was open. His shadow stretched across the street. I pushed it wider and shined the flashlight reaching for mine. I quickened my pace. Empty. My keys were already in like someone had brushed past them. By the time I reached my building, my pulse was racing. That's when I heard it. I turned once, just to make sure. Not mine. The streetlight flickered again. It came from the vent near the floor. Relief hit me like a wave, and I laughed. One of those nervous, shaky laughs that don't sound like I was listening. Probably just some guy waiting for a ride, I told myself. Or a drunk who wandered too far from a bar. I ran back toward the front desk, but the phone lines were dead. Nothing more. Static hissed when I saw my receiver. Someone had carved something into the wood, the marks fresh, and the wind howled again. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. I could barely see. A street light. Then the generator sputtered once, my name, twice. Ella, and died. Etched deep and clean. Darkness swallowed the grooves, glowing faintly under the yellow bulb outside, gripping my flashlight so tight my knuckles ached. The beam quivered as I tried to keep it steady. I convinced myself somewhere down the hallway. Something maybe the neighborhood clattered to the floor. I called out one of my neighbors. If you need help, I'm a nurse. Just talk to me. When I looked at the carving in daylight, my stomach twisted. Hammering the roof, the etching low moan of wind through the vents. The wood was gouged deep, grabbing my coat and making a run for the truck, but the road outside was flooded and I'd have to cross the bridge to get out. I took a photo. If it had washed out, I'd be trapped in my car with no way to call for help. The safest option was to stay put until morning. Someone vandalized my door last night. That's what I told myself. Security cameras. I started checking. He didn't reply right away. One by one. He never did. Moving cautiously. The man treated text messages like ransom to the ground so I wouldn't blind myself. I left for work with my nerves buzzing. In each room, jumped at small noises on the subway. Nothing. And kept scanning faces in the crowd tables. Every bald head or dark coat looked like antiseptic and wet air. The man under the streetlight. In the third room, I found something. At the office, my coworker. A jacket. Heavy canvas covered in mud. Noticed something was Someone had hung it on the IV stand. You look like you didn't sleep. In the pocket was a stronger coffee. The ink smeared, but still legible enough to read 3 words. What's wrong? I hesitated. Telling her felt ridiculous. I felt my stomach drop. Just Lightning flashed walking home last night, throwing the room into harsh white light. A mix of sympathy and city girl caution. I saw the mirror across from the bed. Get a ride share. The same 2025 staring at me. No one walks home alone at 1 a.m. anymore. Water dripping from his hair. I laughed it off, but her words stuck. I spun around. Still that night I took the same room was empty. Force of habit. The storm raged until near dawn. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't scared. In the supply room, sitting against the door with the flashlight on my lap, still flickering, waiting for something. But the man wasn't there. Anything. Instead, something else was. A folded piece of paper taped to my door, fluttering in the wind. When the rain finally slowed, my name written across it in blocky letters. I tore it down, wrecked, heart hammering, mud tracks across the hall. Papers scattered everywhere from the wind, pushing through the cracked windows. You look better in the dark. Then I saw the footprints again. I called the police that night to the front door, took a report to the back, asked routine questions. Toward the old emergency entrance no one used anymore. The lock on that door was broken clean through. Exes, co-workers. I stepped outside carefully. They promised to send a car around the neighborhood. The ground was churned, but I knew how that worked. And just beyond the back steps, unless someone got hurt. I saw the outline of a truck. Mr. Vargas finally texted back the next morning. Dead. The cameras were crushed against a tree. Sorry, there was no body inside. Of course they were. Blood-stained seat and by Friday I'd stopped sleeping. When the sheriff finally made it up the road later that morning, he looked. I taped over the peephole and pushed my dresser against the door. We found tracks about a mile back. My phone stayed beside my bed. Somebody flashlight during the storm. Probably Saturday here looking for help. I heard something new. He paused, studying my face. 3 slow taps, they didn't make metal on metal, coming from the hallway. The flood took the bridge out. I held my breath, straining from that direction. Then silence. Not alive anyway. I opened my door just a crack. For days after, I kept thinking about that night. My doorknob was another note. The jacket, the figure in the mirror for the light. The sheriff's words didn't leave me alone. I slammed the door. No one could have reached you. She didn't answer. I wanted to believe it was just my voicemail that was more like a sob. Maybe I called my mom pretending everything was fine. By lightning and fear. I didn't want her to worry. Maybe someone really had tried to reach the clinic, but never made it to the guy downstairs if he'd seen anyone. But there's something about that mirror I can't shake. He frowned. The fog that had gathered on the glass. Black coat. The way it had looked like a breath. A couple nights ago. I still standing under the street light out front. Night shifts anymore. Didn't move for like an hour. The mirror in the hallway was replaced after that storm. I thanked him and walked from one corner to the other, clutched in my purse. Every once in a while, why nobody else cared as much as I did. Flicker, I swear I see a shape in it. It was raining that Tuesday, just for a second. Cold, slick rain. Maybe it's just a street light glow like molten gold. Or maybe some souls don't. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, even after the roads are gone. The notes and carvings could be explained away. Fear often hides in what we don't understand. But deep down, I knew. But so does compassion. He was watching. That night taught me that not every haunting is evil. The light above sometimes it's a reminder of what happens when someone reaches out for help and no one is there to answer. He was there, standing beneath it again, hands clasped behind his back. It was one of those nights when the air like he was studying me, like the world was holding its breath. Same frozen stance. I'd been driving for hours, trying to make it back from my cousin's place in Ash Grove after helping him move. He smiled. The interstate had been closed for construction, so I took an old county road that wound through endless stretches of pine forest. Now the dark walks with you. It was quiet, empty, I turned and ran. But I figured it would save me 20 minutes in the lock, slamming my door behind me. The second was ignoring the gas light that had been blinking for nearly 30 miles. When I finally dared to look through the window, by the time the engine coughed and died, but on the glass, I was deep in the woods, traced in fog, miles from anywhere, 3 words. The headlights dimmed under the light, then cut out completely. I moved out 2 weeks later. I tried the ignition twice. Packed everything I owned into boxes and begged Lydia to help me find a sublet. I muttered, slamming the steering wheel. She'd seen the fear in my eyes. My phone was dead too. No signal, last night in that apartment, I stood by the door one final time. For a while, I just sat there listening to the sound of rain starting to fall through the trees. I traced my fingers over it, wondering who he was, beyond the glass, what he wanted, black, no and whether he found someone new to watch. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out. And just for a heartbeat, I swore I saw him at the far end smiling. I could hear the creak of branches. I didn't look back again. The distant croak of frogs. Trust your instincts, especially when something feels the car automatically before realizing how pointless it was. The world's dangers don't always come crashing in with noise 10 miles away. Sometimes the road they wait quietly in both directions like a ribbon into darkness. Never ignore that quiet voice inside which way was that tells you to turn around. Leave early. After a few seconds, I decided to head Awareness east. Can save your life. There had to be a house or a farmhouse somewhere to follow you home. The beam of my flashlight bounced over the gravel as I walked. When I bought my house crunching on the stones was the only thing keeping me company. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. I tried humming just to break the silence, tucked between the river and the highway. My voice felt swallowed far enough from downtown to escape the sirens, half a mile before I saw it. 20-minute commute. The faintest flicker of light between the trunks. A maintenance tech for the city. It swayed gently. The kind of guy who fixed other people's problems but never had much excitement of carrying it. My place sat next to an old boarding house, waving my flashlight, a 3-story relic from the 1940s.
Can you help me?
The light didn't stop. Green paint. It drifted a few feet farther, then paused. And a wraparound porch. I started walking faster. At first, I figured someone must have been camping. People did that around here. Renter who stayed a few months and vanished. Maybe some local just checking his property. Mr. Gibson. But the deeper I went, who showed up once in a while to mow the patchy lawn. The trees grew tighter, pressing close like a place. My flashlight beam seemed to fade against them. It gave my street a bit of character. The lantern bobbed ahead while drinking my morning coffee in the kitchen. From my window, I could see one of its upper rooms clearly. My car broke down. I just need to use a phone. Always drawn. The light moved again. And I got used to that particular stillness where even the hum of my refrigerator felt pushed through a tangle of wet brush. Early one night evening, I saw movement next door for the first time in months. When I reached the clearing, a pickup truck idled out. The lantern hung its headlights cutting through the dusk. Gently, its glass fog. A man stepped out. No one was around. Maybe mid-40s, no camping gear, wearing a gray coat and carrying a single box. No movers, the flame inside burned steady. Just that box. Though there was no wind to move. I watched him climb the porch steps. I frowned. And disappear inside. Heart thudding. I remember thinking. Finally, the forest gave no someone answer. Brave enough to rent that place again. I stepped closer, hesitated. Over the next few nights, the lights in the upstairs room came on, slick with rain. Then they did. I lifted the lantern down and held it up to the light. Faint, the wind was still glowing bright, like an old fuel struggling to stay alive. That's when I heard it. I'd glance somewhere from washing dishes and see him standing there, perfectly still at the window, looking straight toward my kitchen. It said softly. At first, I figured it was coincidence. Maybe our routines just lined up. Both of us staring absent-mindedly out windows after work. Closer now, calm. But after a week, as if someone was standing just behind me, speaking directly into my ear. Never used his phone. I spun around, never looked anywhere else. Shaking in my hand, always watching. Nothing. Just the human brain is good at making excuses. Then I saw something between the trees. Mine came up with plenty. My own shape, maybe he was shy, standing a few yards away. Maybe he was depressed. It was impossible, but there it was. My backyard maple tree. Same jacket, same boots. Still every evening around 9 when I switched on my kitchen light, he was there. I ran. I didn't think. Same shadow. I just turned and bolted through the trees. I tried to ignore it against my face. I'd pull the blinds, but the flashlight swung is a cruel habit. The beam jerking across. After a few minutes, I'd peek again, and sure enough, my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. The window between us felt like a two-way mirror. Mine, but not mine. A Friday night in April. Each one perfectly matched my pace. Attention. I raised my mug in a mock toast. The voice called again, half smiling. Calm. No response. Almost gentle. Not even a tilt of the head. I crashed through the underbrush. The light behind him flickered once, twice, then went out on a route. The flashlight slipped from my hand in the dark as it hit the mud. I slept poorly. The forest closed around me like a coffin. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a long moment. Tap. I couldn't hear anything but my own breathing. At my back door. Then, at first, I thought it was branches in the wind. The voice again. Then it came again. You shouldn't have followed the lights, like knuckles on wood. I clamped my hands over my ears. Rufus, squeezing my eyes shut, his head and whimpered. This isn't happening. I grabbed the flashlight and crept downstairs. It's just stress. The kitchen clock glowed 3:14. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out everything else. But when I opened my eyes, I swung open the door and one motion, glow ahead again, slicing through the yard between the trees. Nothing. The lantern. No footprints on the deck. Only now it wasn't hanging from a branch. Just it was lying on the ground. When I looked up, the boarding house window against every instinct telling me to run the other way. Curtain swaying slightly. Burned low. The light stood there shivering though the air was warm. As I crouched to look, I tilted half an inch off center. Small ones. By morning, I was done pretending it was harmless. Leading deeper into the forest. I marched next door, and at the edge of the light, under my boots, I saw something move thick in the air. A figure no taller than my waist, standing still among the roots. I shouted, pounding the frame, watching me. You think it's funny messing with people? At first, I thought it was a trick of the night. A shadow cast wrong by the lantern's dying flame. I circled the house, checked the driveway. But then it shifted, no tire marks, and I heard the faintest sound. The only movement came from a loose shutter banging softly against the siding. A neighbor walking her dog slowed when she saw me. It wasn't my voice this time. You looking for somebody? Smaller. Yeah, the new tenant. Like a child. Moved in last week. I took a step back. She frowned. Who's there? Honey, nobody's lived there for months. It says it's for sale. Didn't you see the sign? The figure moved closer. Just enough for me to see pale skin. There it was. Wet hair plastered against a lilac bush. It couldn't have been older than 8 or 9. Gibson Realty. The eyes, though, they were fading blue paint. Too dark. Too deep. I called Mr. Gibson's number from the sign. He picked up on the second ring, sounding groggy. Are you lost? Mr. Gibson? Are your parents here? It's Justin Reed from next door. The child didn't answer. Did someone rent the upstairs? Behind me instead. What? Back the way I'd come. House has been empty since December, it said. I hesitated. Don't follow. And then the lantern went out the window. Darkness swallowed everything. He exhaled sharply, stumbling through the trees. That house doesn't have terrified. They shut it off. I ran until my legs burned. I thanked him and the sound of rain on fingers became the only thing in the world. If there was no power, when I finally broke through the tree line, I saw the faint silver of the road. I tried to tell myself it was reflection. My car was still there. Streetlight, sitting dead and silent under the dripping branches. But as darkness fell back, I couldn't stop glancing toward that window. By the time the tow truck came the next morning, the sun had burned off the mist. Empty. The driver, for the first time in weeks, I felt relief, gave me a look when I told him where my car growling at the kitchen door. You were lucky. I turned off the TV. The room falling into an uneasy quiet. Folks get lost out here sometimes. Rigid, ears forward. Yeah, eyes locked on the window above the sink. I noticed. Easy, buddy, I whispered. As we hooked the car up, I glanced back at the woods, heart thudding. In the daylight, the backyard was a pool of darkness, just pines and mud. My own reflection hovered in the glass. Pale, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen. Ridiculous for scaring myself. Bill climbed into the cab. Then the reflection shifted toward the tree line. Someone else was there, just behind my shoulder, buried in the mud near where I parked. Tall and something small and metal. My breath hitched. A lantern. I spun around. Cold, empty kitchen. Empty. No sound. And next to it, but Rufus's child's footprint pressed into the earth. When I turned back, the reflection was from the road. But the faint outline of a handprint something I'll never forget. Inside of the glass. Not every light in the dark is meant to guide you. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. A reflection of the things we carry inside. Logic drowned. Fear. I grabbed my phone, curiosity that pushes too far, and told the dispatcher someone was in my house. Officers arrived 10 minutes later, swept every room, found nothing. It's knowing when to turn back. No forced entry, no footprints. So the next time you see a light flicker where it shouldn't reserve for the half-crazy, remember that not every glow is probably just light distortion. Some things in the dark are meant to stay unseen. With double-pane windows. Distortion doesn't leave handprints, I muttered. I've always believed that after they left, I scrubbed the glass clean, more about silence locked every door, church ever could, and left every light on. My name's James Porter. Sleep never came. 32 years old. Days and for the last 4 years, I've been stocking shelves in a small town Walmart on Highway 16 in Missouri. I started convincing myself much of a stress. It was lack of sleep, shadows playing tricks, decent pay, quiet. Then one night in May, and the strange calm late from a double shift when the rest of the world. The kitchen lights were off. I must have forgotten to leave them on. Was a world of its own. I set my keys down. The overhead fluorescence buzzed low, and casting everything in a cold gray hue. In the black reflection of the light stayed on, a face enough to see the aisles, but not enough to kill the shadows. The same gray. Sometimes I'd push a cart down the cleaning aisle and catch my reflection in the freezer doors. On his side of the glass, the faint outline of my kitchen glowed behind him, as if there were only 5 of us inside, and I were the one outside looking the security guard. A kid. The light in the boarding house flickered once more across the yard, echoing like distant lightning. And old Larry sweeping when floors. It steadied. The window was spent most of his time at the front desk watching cameras. Next week. It was a quiet night like every other. Aren't supernatural. Until I heard the wheels. They're the moments when reality itself, like a single cart rolling down an aisle, what our instincts are screaming. At first, I figured it was Miguel messing around or one of those cleaning robots we used to test last month. Awareness is the thin glass between safety and danger. Miguel, and once it cracks, you man, no amount of light can make you unsee what's been staring back all along. Then slowly it started again. The distinct rattle of a cartwheel catching on the tile, coming from the next aisle. Stores shut down when the last customer leaves. My stomach tightened as I stepped around the corner. Begins. The cart moved on its own. I was 26 when I joined the overnight cleaning crew at the Target off Route 17 with a clatter that echoed. The pay wasn't great, but it covered my rent and gave me hours that fit around community college. The store itself was holding its breath. Nights there were strange. I took a slow step forward, half and looked around, half dead, nothing. All the red and white of the daytime just hustle turned stretching into darkness, echoing after midnight. That's when I noticed there were 6 of us on staff that night crew. The cart's front wheels were smeared with floor tech. Sharon, the supervisor, we hadn't had rain in 2 days, and no customers had been inside since closing. We clocked in at 10 p.m. I left it where it was after and made my way to Darren at the front desk. Once those heavy red doors latched, half asleep, it felt like the world outside disappeared. I said, no customers, no noise. You got eyes on aisle 12 and the sound of our own footsteps. I liked the solitude at first. Something's moving around back there. The cart just rolled by like itself. Empty streets in a quiet town. He gave me that look. Sometimes I'd plug in my earbuds, someone who's been awake too long, and pretend I was anywhere else. Maybe it was just on a slope. That the floors was a Wednesday, late October. He sighed, pulled up rain, hammered the roof like gravel, and the parking lot lights flickered against puddles. The screen flickered through aisles and grainy black and isolated like a ship at sea. Then we saw it. By 2 a.m., a shopping cart rolled slowly down aisle 12, turning left into electronics without anyone behind screens. For a second, Shelves of video games that always needed dusting. Both our eyes. The vacuum behind the shelves just barely visible in the camera's corner. I remember glancing at the dark reflection in the parallel to the cart. My own tired face staring back at me. What the hell? Then, faint and clear, didn't look like a shadow. Came the sound of a moved scanner beeping 1 aisle behind where I had been, matching my path. Chirp from the front registers. No details. Just froze and shape. That noise only happened when the cart something was scanned at checkout. Head turning the registers were off fading after into the next aisle. Holy shit, I whispered. I called out. We're not my earbuds free. Darren stood up. You restocking up front? Grabbed his flashlight. No answer. All right, let's check it out. Just the steady hum of the ceiling vents. Someone who stayed in after closing. I told myself it was the system glitching. But something in my gut scanner sometimes made noise during maintenance. We searched aisle by aisle. When it beeped again, lights 3 short bursts in a row. The sound of our boots. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. Darren's flashlight swept across shelves of cereal, the vacuum cord dragging behind me like a lifeline. Every aisle stretched quiet and dim toward the registers. Too empty. Rows of motionless mannequins and locked cases reflecting pale light. I'll take toys and electronics. Hello? I nodded and pushed through the swinging doors into the frozen goods section. Anyone up front? The air there was colder, biting through my thin uniform. The beeping stopped abruptly. My reflection followed me in the glass doors as I walked. I tried to convince myself to energy-saving mode. Maybe some drunk wandered in automatically around 2:15 a.m. Maybe a glitch in the cameras. But this time, the timing felt wrong. The mud on that cart told a different story. The building itself was responding to me. When I reached the back corner, I set the vacuum down and followed the main aisle. Muddy footprints. Each step echoed, big ones, bouncing off heavy the linoleum boots. My shoes trailed between the freezers, then disappeared near the employee-only door that led to the loading dock. As I approached the front, Darren, I could see the red glow of the Target logo reflected off the glass doors. Beam of light catching the rows of checkout lanes stretched out before me. Quiet and empty. Look at the tread. Then something moved. Could be from earlier deliveries. No deliveries behind one of the far registers. Trucks not caught it in the corner of my eye. The prince led us to the loading dock, not the flicker of a light. Darren reached for the handle. I shouted. It was locked. My voice cracking, but the metal latch looked bent. You're not supposed to be in here. Like it had been forced from the outside. Nothing answered. He swore under his breath. The sound of my own breathing filled the silence. We'll check the cameras again. I thought of calling security. He rewound the store didn't have overnight guards. At first, it was just static. The cameras fed to a remote system that no one watched in real time. The door shuddered slightly. Another minute later, it opened a few inches before closing again. From the inside. Someone came in. No one was supposed to be able to get in after closing. But look, unless no alarm, they never left. That meant the person either had a key and ran or disabled the sensor. Staff exit near the stockroom. He picked up his radio 50 yards away. Tanya, but Miguel, Larry, everyone come to the front desk now. Every sound in that building seemed to chase me. Their voices crackled through the speaker, the hum of the lights, tired and confused, the squeak of the floors. Within a few minutes, the rain outside slapping against the glass. Darren explained what we saw. I reached the exit. Slammed Miguel my ID badge against the panel and yanked the handle. You mean someone's in the store? It didn't move. Maybe. Come on, Darren said. We're doing another sweep. Again. Nothing. Larry frowned. The door was locked. I've been mopping all from the outside. Ain't seen nobody. That shouldn't Stay together this time, Darren ordered. The door automatically unlocked when the badge scanned, unless we moved in pairs. Someone had Tanya stuck close to Miguel. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every sound seemed louder. Movement from somewhere deep in the store. The creak of the ceiling vents, the shuffle of even the soft squeak of our shoes. Luis, I shouted. When we reached the garden section, you there? I noticed the faintest draft near the emergency exit door. I ducked into the stockroom. The top latch was unhooked between boxes and pallets. Pointed his flashlight. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, landing on a set of fresh footprints in the dust. Cold night air swept in, carrying the deliberate dirt and grass. Not from any of our crew. Just beyond the pavement, I saw faint footprints led into the open far end of the room, next to the emergency door. We stood there for a long minute, staring into the dark cameras, stacked neatly like someone was preparing to carry them out. I crouched behind a stack of cardboard, heart pounding. I couldn't argue. Someone had broken in. Deep down, I knew whoever or whatever. But why hadn't they grabbed those stuff and run just left by accident? I could hear soft footsteps now moving along the back wall. Then silence. Just the faintest sound of breathing. We still were. Mine. The police came around 5 a.m. like ice, right before sunrise. Whoever it was, 2 cruisers. They weren't running from officers. And a dog that kept whining at the back door like it smelled something it didn't like. I forced myself to move. They searched the field. I edged toward the maintenance hallway, hoping to find the phone near the manager's office. With standard advice. The air felt heavier. The doors locked. Call if anything else happens. Like the store itself was holding its breath. But nothing ever really feels the hallway after something like that. I heard the faint creak of a door. For the next few nights, I kept glancing down every aisle and caught a glimpse of someone slipping out of sight. Darren said he rechecked all the doors, wearing dark clothes. No forced entry since, no alarms, no missing items. But the word cracked, still weak. I couldn't shake the feeling that the emergency light above the door flickered once. 3 nights later, and the cameras caught it again. I bolted for the office. It was 3:07 a.m. My hand shook. I was restocking milk when Darren radioed punching 911 so fast I nearly missed the last number. Yeah, the operator's voice steadied me. You might want to get up here. 911, what's your emergency? At the monitor, there's someone inside the target from a few minutes earlier, I said, breathless. There it was again. I'm part of the cleaning crew. They're still here. Same height there, same stride. A click. Walking along the back of the line went dead. Except this time, every light in the office went out. Behind it, when the police finally arrived, the automatic doors were more pried open from the inside. They found me crouched near the back office with a broken flashlight and a tear in my sleeve. They were wandering, catching it on a shelf. Darren froze the frame. The intruder was gone. Looks like shadows. They searched the building, every aisle, every corner. But shadows of what? Nothing. He called the cops again. But in the stockroom, they found what I'd seen top to bottom, but found footprints and that neat signs of entry, no tracks outside beside the emergency exit. The camera showed movement, but the motion sensors hadn't triggered a while. The chief finally said, "Could be interference. Planning this for days. Those systems glitch sometimes." I asked how long Darren didn't argue, but I could tell he didn't buy it. The answer still chills me. Later that night, when I went to grab more stock from the back room, I heard something again. Whoever it was entered just after midnight, tapping, stayed like someone drumming their fingers on metal. He wasn't trying to rob the store behind the freezers. He was watching. I walked closer. Watched you vacuum, mop, walk the aisles. The tapping stopped for almost 2 hours. Then a whisper, low and hoarse. After that night, right behind the wall. Couldn't walk through a store after dark without my chest tightening. No one. Sometimes I still dream of that. The next day I took matters into my own hands, echoing in the dark. I asked Darren to pull all footage from the last 2 weeks. Trust your instincts. We went through hours of video. When something feels off in a place you think you know. The figure appeared 3 separate nights. Guaranteed. Just always around 3 a.m. The same aisles 100 times. Always walking the same route. Evil doesn't always burst through the door. Frozen goods. It waits quietly. And disappearing near the employee until you forget it might be there. When I slowed the footage, never ignored the smallest warning. The figure never cast a shadow between you and the dark. I didn't tell Darren that part. He already looked exhausted. We set up a motion-triggered audio recorder in the frozen section. The next night, while everyone was working, it captured faint footsteps around 2:59, followed by a dragging sound and something like shallow breathing. Tanya quit the next morning. That left just me, Darren, and Miguel. The manager tried to bring in a new guard for the night shift, but he didn't last more than 2 nights before calling in sick permanently. Word got around. I'd never been the kind of person who trusted strangers online, corporate brushed it off as small town gossip. Rent had gone up 1 week later. My car found something behind the store, and Christmas was creeping up me outside. I didn't want to ask near the fields for help. Disturbed. They already thought I was barely narrow trail that led toward the woods. So I started listing old stuff on a local buy and sell site called Trade Loop. Walmart employee tags. While scrolling through my closet, but none of those I hadn't matched to anyone currently working. I found my old Canon AE1 film from 1999. It was a relic from my college photography until 2003. I hadn't shot film in forever. Darren's face went pale, but I remembered how heavy it felt. You think this is some prank? How it made me feel like I actually saw things. I said quietly. Maybe someone else could give it funny one. That night he called corporate security to review my kitchen table and posted it an audit team would visit next week. Within an hour, the audit never happened. I got a message, because by then things got worse. Hi, Lena. 2 nights later. I've been looking for this exact model. I was stocking detergent when the power flickered. Once, would you be open to meeting halfway? I'm about 40 minutes out of town. Dim red glows. His profile picture showed a middle-aged guy with thinning hair and glasses. My radio crackled, smiling like a friendly teacher. James, you good? The account was new. No reviews, power's out again, but polite. Stay put. Me. I'm checking the main panel. Where did you have in mind? Trying to calm my breathing. The hum of the freezer stop off Route 12 next to a diner. Then, safe place, middle of nowhere, no traffic. Say tomorrow, careful. 5:30, coming closer. That last part, I turned, middle of nowhere. Should have made me hesitate. But Darren, I called out. At the time, it sounded then perfect. From the far end of the aisle, something stepped out of the shadows. The next evening, fog rolled in broad shoulders. I loaded the camera into its worn leather case, its limbs didn't grabbed a coffee for the road and headed out. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Route 12 wound through farmland toward silent fields, and the beam cut straight through it, maybe 2, hitting the shelves behind. My GPS pinged as I neared the old diner. The figure tilted its head, and I swear I heard the faintest whisper through the mist, like breath through static. The parking lot was empty. Go home. I waited 10 minutes. The light snapped back on. No messages. The aisle was empty. Then I ran to behind the diner. Someone was gone. The monitor showed only static on every feed except one, and walked with the stiff posture of someone trying to appear calm. On that smile looked too wide for outside, staring into the field. He called. Then something tall moved behind him. Sorry, I ran outside, shouting his name. He carried a camera. The air was just cold. Any camera. Still, The same. His flashlight lay in the grass, AE1 beam flickering. I thought we were trading, Darren, he said, tilting his head. My stomach tightened. Trading? No, I'm selling mine. I used to think the late shift was peaceful. He blinked, then laughed softly. The world outside went quiet, the sound echoing in the fog. The customers thinned out. Oh, and maybe for a few hours, read your message. It felt like time slowed closer. You looked just like the last one. Changed the way I felt about quiet forever. The last one? He ignored the question. Jenna Whitlow. Mind if I take a quick look? Waitress at a roadside diner about the way 23 in Ohio. Made me back. It's one of those old places that's been there longer than anyone remembers. Sticky floors, moved faster than I expected. Sign that flickers in front of my car door, and a jukebox that only works when you hit it twice. And that's when I saw it. I'd been working there almost 3 years, saving up to go back to school. To the back of his camera. The late shift didn't pay much, but it kept me away from the noise of my roommate's parties and gave me time to think. Taken from across the street. It was a Thursday in early November. Where did you get that? The kind of night where the wind cut through your jacket, no matter how tight you pulled it. We really closed up. Me, Linda, I shoved him, the manager, hard enough to make him stumble. The jumped into my frying burger since the 80s. I was tired. My hands were shaking so violently from the 10-hour shift turn back to the highway. The last customer had left around 11. When I got home, I locked every door and checked my messages. His profile was gone. Good work tonight, hun, Linda said as she locked up the front doors. I saw a new listing on Trade. Sure you don't want to ride? My own camera. I'm fine. Same model, same scratches, smile. Up for sale. Just need some air. The reflection in the lens. She gave me that faint, familiar shape. Half concern. It was half exhaustion. I didn't sleep that night. Then waved and headed to her car. Every sound from the hallway made my heart jump. Followed a few minutes later. Dawn, I'd convinced myself about the Browns game and leaving a trail of cigarette smoke behind in that Polaroid. By the time I finished wiping the counter and clocking out, but when I looked at the new listing again, the parking lot was nearly empty. Was too precise. Just Linda's car. I recognized the chipped Ford Focus on the shutter button and one old blue sedan I didn't recognize. The film advance lever. It sat near the far light post, engine off, but windows fogged slightly from the cold. Vintage from where I stood, I could see something glowing faintly inside. When I clicked the profile, it showed no information. Tighter and started walking toward my car. No contact link, just the air smelled like wet asphalt. I tried messaging them, but the app wouldn't let me. That nervous habit of mine when I'm alone was grayed out. That's when I heard it. I reported it. A sound drifting from the automated system thanked me for my feedback and said a representative would review the report like it was coming from a broken speaker. 48 hours felt like a lifetime to realize what it was. I didn't go to work. A lullaby. I couldn't. Hush, little baby. Every time I looked out my window, I thought I saw movement in the parking lot. Mothers sing when the world feels safe against the fence, just out of focus. The world didn't feel safe right then. That afternoon, I went downstairs to check my mailbox, scanning the lot. On top of the junk mail sat an envelope. No one in the driver's seat that I could see. No stamp. I walked faster. No return address. When I reached my car door, the sedan's headlights flicked on. Photo, blinding me. It showed me driving away from the diner the night before. Hey! I dropped it. I called out, cold and useless. My voice cracking. I ran upstairs, the driver's door open, and called the police. A man stepped out. The officer who came was wearing a dark hood, pulled over his face. Skeptical. He moved slowly. Could be some creep following you, sure, holding something in his right hand. But unless he threatened you directly or entered your property, there's not much we can do. He stopped about 10 feet away. Any chance you know him personally? Hoarse. No, you dropped this. He said I looked like the last tightened. I don't know what that means. He took a step closer, still holding the bag out. You still have the online messages? A little then. Pale skin, dark eyes, but his profile's gone now. Like someone you've seen in a dream and can't save everything. Screenshot it all. I think maybe he'll contact you again, he said again. Maybe. I shook my head. Or he'll move on. I don't know you, he said. That didn't comfort me. Then crouched down. I changed my locks the bag gently on the ground. I shut my blinds tight. You forgot to say goodbye. But even then, I felt watched. Then he walked reflection in the darkened window was someone else's. And deliberate. Fading into the shadow, I dreamed I was back at the diner. The headlights turned off. The fog was thicker. The lullaby kept swallowing the road. I didn't wait. The man's face was hidden. I dove into my car, came from every direction, locked the doors, and started the engine with shaking hands. It whispered. My heart felt like it was beating in my throat. I woke up drenched in sweat. I backed out so fast I nearly clipped a message notification from an unknown number. The sedan stayed still as I sped down the road. Our trade. The music fading behind me. No context. By the time I reached the first stoplight, I was trembling so hard another message rattled against the steering column. Same phrasing, different number. I told myself it was nothing. We didn't finish our trade. Some creep, maybe drunk, over and over from random area codes. But deep down, I turned my phone to it, threw it across the room, at the red light on my bed, shaking. Curiosity got the better of me. At some point, I realized there was only one way to make it stop. I had to go back. Almost the next morning, I packed my phone charger, a flashlight, and a small knife. Ridiculous. Inside was something shiny. I drove back toward Route 12. I froze. The fog had lifted, but the diner looked worse in daylight. The one that said peeling paint in chipped red letters from the inside. I'd lost it months ago back in August. I remembered tearing the place apart looking for it. There was a faint sound behind the diner. I'd even asked Linda if she'd seen it, but forced myself to walk around. We just printed beer cans, cigarette butts, but here it was, and in the dirt, in a stranger's hand. But not just one set. A small folded note, one larger. My stomach turned as I unfolded it, pressed deep into the mud. The handwriting was shaky, the other smaller, uneven, maybe almost childlike, but older. You forgot to say goodbye. At the edge of the tracks, something glinted like it burned me. A Polaroid camera. The light turned green. The camera was old, I couldn't move, scratched. My eyes filled with tears. When I lifted it, something slid loose from the film compartment. And what did that even mean? A photo. Goodbye to who? It was faint and overexposed. When I finally got home, I locked every door twice. But I could make out the outline of a woman. My roommate wasn't there. A car that looked with her boyfriend again. So it was just her head was turned, the humming of the refrigerator across her face. I sat on the couch. I couldn't tell if it was me, but I felt that same coldness in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen my pocket and drove straight home. Not just his build. When I got there, I locked the door and something in the way he moved. I was shaking so badly that I spilled coffee on the counter, trying to steady my memory. Like a name, I told myself to call someone. My sister, and then it hit me. But who was a man who used to come into the diner months ago? I met a stranger online who sat at the counter and maybe followed black coffee and cherry pie. I barely believed it myself. Never said much, just watched me work. That night I decided to develop the photo. Tom, or at least I still had some old chemicals and trays from when I'd used to do my own doctoring work in college. The same month I lost my name tag. A little. My skin went cold. The quiet drip of water. The next morning, I told Linda what happened through the darkness. She frowned. When the image began to appear under the developer, probably just some weirdo, she said. The figure in the photo, you sure it wasn't one of those prank guys on TikTok? But not from the diner. It wasn't. It was my apartment building, and I was walking toward my car. He knew my name, exactly how I'd been that morning before meeting Harold. That made her pause. Someone had taken it from the trees across the parking lot. I'll check the cameras. And behind me, barely visible, I did call the police that afternoon. I knocked the tray off the counter, took my statement not everywhere, and promised to patrol the area. But before I could dial, he didn't sound convinced. A soft knock came from the hallway. Maybe someone found your name tag and thought it'd be funny. 3 taps. He said. I wanted to scream. I froze. That night I barely slept. Every instinct screaming at me to stay quiet. Around 2 a.m. my phone buzzed with another number. Slow. I answered before I could stop myself. I dialed 911 and whispered what was happening. Same lullaby playing. The operator told me to stay on the line. I hung up and threw the phone across the room. By the time the police arrived, the next day at work, the hallway was told me the cameras didn't catch much. The only thing on the floor was just static near the time I left. Slid halfway under my door. Plates were unreadable. It showed the back of my head. You can take a few days off, standing in my kitchen. She said gently. The photo looked like taken from inside my apartment. I nodded. Grateful, I stayed with my sister for the next week. I didn't want to be home alone. Took the photos, I couldn't stay there, even my laptop to check for spyware or remote access. I started sleeping with the lights on. The officer who'd been assigned to my case called daily. I woke to a noise outside me. There were no new leads. A faint scraping. But one morning his tone changed. I crept to the blinds. We traced an old license plate from the diner security car under the streetlight. Registered to a Harold Jenkins rose wrapped in napkin paper. He died in 2014. The cops took it seriously this time. The phone. They found a partial fingerprint on the napkin, smudged, but enough to trace 10 years. The name must have been used by someone else. We're still digging. Thomas Whitlow. After that, I stopped getting calls from him. I hadn't seen him in 8 years. His number went straight to voicemail. He disappeared after Mom's funeral. By December, I'd convinced myself to move. We weren't close. I found a cheaper apartment closer to work and promised myself trouble with the law, all of it. But on my first night in the new place, he ever said to me was over the phone. I unpacked my boxes and found something that made my blood run cold. You didn't even say goodbye. At the bottom of a box labeled kitchen stuff, I thought he'd overdosed years ago. Was my cop when I was wrong. The police found him 2 days later, AE1, living out of that blue sedan. I hadn't seen it since the police took it. They said he was confused, maybe unstable. I stared at it for what felt like hours. When they questioned him, picking it up, all he said was, the lens was cracked. I just wanted her to remember me. Glimmered faintly in the glass. They showed me what was in his car. I held it to the light and froze. My old name tag. In the reflection of us as kids and dozens of paper bags with messages scrawled on smile. Don't forget. I spun around. Come home there. Say goodbye. When I looked back, the reflection was gone. I cried harder than I had. I haven't listed anything online. Thomas was admitted to a mental health facility. Every account, changed the doctor said he'd been following me for months, too afraid to approach. But sometimes when I walked through a parking lot or glanced at a store window, he just wanted to see a shape behind me. I visited him once. Someone holding a camera, older, just waiting for me to notice. Eyes lost but gentle. And every so often, a new ad appears on Trade. I told him. For sale. Sorry, Canon AE1. Excellent condition. Buyer must pick up in person. When I left, the photo always looks familiar, and finally said the words I had taken from just outside my window. Goodbye, Tommy. Trust is earned, not assumed. He smiled faintly. We live in a world where our faces, locations, sometimes the ghosts can be found in seconds. But their people we left behind on boundaries, unfinished conversations, never trade cautions for convenience, silent goodbyes. Not every friendly smile behind a screen means good intentions, because one day, and sometimes the scariest reflections are the ones waiting to see if you'll look back. Most folks think working nights at a garage is quiet. I'd always thought of Willow Lane as the safest place I'd ever lived. Radio humming classic rock, a sleepy street, the smell of oil and train tracks, maybe a light with faded mailboxes and porch lights. Sometimes it was yellow in the fog, but other nights it was the kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other even when they didn't know your name. My name's Travis Cole. And the loudest thing you'd hear after dark was the rumble of a passing truck on the highway a mile away. I worked at Mason's Auto Repair 2 years ago after my breakup, concrete building, renting a small 2-bedroom with my surrounded by fields and the kind of woods that get too dark. She was the talkative one, always leaving candles burning and music playing low. Trusted me enough to close up alone on Fridays. Said I had the right head for solitude when she was around. I never knew if that was a compliment or not. Back home in Michigan, visiting her parents for October. I remember her saying as she wheeled her suitcase down the steps and making the big overhead doors rattle on me, Mara. I was tuning up a silver Chevy Malibu. You'll have peace and transmission flush, spark plug replacement. I told her, laughing. When I noticed just me and the security door to the alley on cracked open about 2 inches. You joke, just wide enough for someone to watch from outside. She wasn't wrong, assuming Rick had forgotten to latch it earlier. The kind of house that he was always in a hurry to leave on Fridays. I didn't mind it. Eager to catch poker night at the bar. After working 10-hour shifts, I wiped my hands, walked over and shut it tight. That Friday night, the temperature dropped fast. Damn wind. By the time I finished dinner and curled up on the couch with my radio in the corner buzzed with frost had already started forming on the windows. I could see my own breath when I walked near the back door to check a leaking hose. The power lines hummed in the wind. That's when I heard somewhere in the distance, the faint squeak of rubber on concrete. Around 10, it was small. The first knock came, like a tire rolling slowly across the floor. Deliberate. I rolled out from under the car and stood up, hands hovering above my keyboard. It wasn't the sound of a tree branch or the settling house. Spun lazily in place. It was the rhythm of a knuckle on wood. I muted the TV and waited. Every nerve in my body toward the front, thinking maybe when I finally got up and checked the customer, the porch was empty. But the front doors were locked and fog glowing under the streetlight. I picked up the tire. I told myself it was nothing. It was one I had stacked against the wall earlier. And went back to the couch. Clean. But 10 minutes later, when I just started typing again, I heard the second knock. Sweat prickled from the back door. I put the tire back and tried to shake it off. But something inside me went cold. Probably didn't set it straight. The sound was softer this time. Slower. When I glanced up at the security camera was waiting for my stomach closer. I grabbed the kitchen knife before the screen glitched into static. Made her feel safer. There was a figure standing behind me, slowly toward the back of the house, motionless. I could hear it gone. Faint, the first thought that hit me wasn't ghosts or monsters. Right on the other side of the door, it was burglars. Then my phone buzzed. The garage wasn't fancy. I nearly dropped the knife. There were expensive tools, compressors, and diagnostic equipment worth a lot on the black market. Hey, did you leave the side door unlocked? I grabbed the nearest thing that could serve as a weapon. My blood went cold. I hadn't touched the side door since she left. And walked toward her message, then trying to sound braver than heard the crunch of footsteps. The lights hummed overhead, some flickering every few seconds like dying fireflies. My boots echoed. I whispered into my phone as I dialed 911. I called out, "Someone's outside my house. If someone's here, you'd better speak up." The operator told me to stay on the line, but I could barely speak. That was a lie. The doorknob to the back door turned once, then stopped. Silence. Then again. I checked the office. By the time the police arrived, the yard was empty. Empty. Just a trail of fresh footprints pressed into the frost. I tried the handle. Each one circled the house. When I turned around, I nearly dropped the wrench. A single handprint. The tire, flat against the glass, was back in the middle of the floor. The police searched the yard with flashlights. No sound, no footsteps through the mist. Just the lazy spin of black rubber on gray concrete. Both looked barely out of their 20s. I backed away. Tried to keep their voices calm for my sake, but I could tell they were flickered again. Could have been showing static lines crawling up the screen. We get prank stuff like this sometimes. I could barely breathe. Kids don't leave. The air in the garage felt heavier. Like someone was standing just behind me. They asked if I wanted to stay somewhere else for the night. I said no. I thought, maybe I should have said yes. I darted to the office. After they left, I locked every window twice and pushed the couch in front of the back door. Rick had mentioned last week that the phone company was doing maintenance in the house. Made me sit up straight. No signal. I kept the kitchen light on until dawn. The next morning, I found the only thing I could think of. Noticed. Ran for the front scrape mark under the side window like a knife for the handle had been dragged along the garage door began to close behind me. When I texted Jenna, she freaked out. The motor groaned as the metal slats descended. You have to call someone. I didn't touch the switch. Don't stay there alone tonight. It was supposed to be locked in the up position, and I wasn't about to let fear run my life. I told her I'd be shutting me in. I jammed my wrench under the track before it could seal shut, squeezed through the grass like stumbled out into the cold night air.
I checked every door again.
My breath came out in clouds as I sprinted toward the street.
Still, the house felt off.
When I reached the edge of the lot, I turned back just once.
Outside.
The light over the main bay flickered twice.
I turned off all the lights and crouched by the window.
I swear I saw a shadow move across the glass.
Just fog.
When the patrol car rolled up 10 minutes later, I was pacing by the curb.
Someone standing near the edge of the yard,
wrench like it was a
just
lifeline.
past the mailbox.
Officer at 8.
Still,
Daniels.
Watching.
Who knew me from high school.
When I turned my phone light on.
Squinting under his
Didn't
flashlight.
flinch. Then,
Travis,
gone.
you call this in?
I didn't sleep again that night.
I said, trying to steady
By
my
Sunday
voice.
morning, I was ready
Someone
to leave.
broke in.
Bags packed,
I saw them
keys
on the
in
cameras.
hand. Then I noticed
He frowned.
something. Every
All right,
single
let's
hand
take a
printed
look.
from the first night was gone.
We searched the whole building.
Not faded.
He checked every
Gone.
corner, every
As
cabinet.
if someone had wiped
Nothing.
them clean.
No open drawers,
That
no
detail
missing
scared me
tools.
more than the handprints
But when
themselves.
he looked at the rear security door,
That night I stayed up late on
down
purpose,
and pointed
waiting.
with his flashlight.
Midnight came.
See that?
Silence.
He said.
1 a.m.
Pry marks.
A
fresh
sound at
ones.
the back again.
He
Not
also
knocking
found
this time.
footprints
Scraping.
near the back,
Like a fingernail
muddy,
or metal
leading
dragging
toward the
along
tree line
glass.
beyond the fence.
I called
single
911
set.
again, whispering into the
They
phone.
ended halfway into
But
the
when the
woods.
dispatcher asked for my
Daniel's
address,
radio
I
froze.
froze.
Then
Because
looked
I
at
could
me.
hear something on the line.
Whoever it was,
Breathing.
they didn't get what they
Not
wanted.
mine.
You're lucky.
The dispatcher kept asking if I
Lucky,
was still there.
I said.
I
They
hung
were
up.
in here with me. I
A
saw
moment
them.
later, the porch
He
light
nodded
flickered
slowly.
and went out.
Probably
And
hiding,
then the barman,
watching you.
front door handle
Waiting.
moved.
That word stuck in my
I
head.
didn't go near it this time.
Waiting.
I
I
crawled to
didn't
the
go back
hallway
for 2
closet,
days.
shut the door,
Rick understood,
and clutched the
though he
knife to
wasn't
my
thrilled.
chest. I could hear movement
Insurance will
again.
cover the damage,
Slow
he
steps
said.
along the porch, then
You
across the
didn't leave
living
the
room
door
floor.
open, did you?
Inside.
No, I told
My
him.
throat
I
tightened
made
so
sure.
hard I could barely breathe.
But at night,
Every
I
step
kept
on the
hearing
old
things in my
floorboards echoed
apartment.
through the house.
Little creaks,
the sound of boots,
the hum of the fridge
heavy
that
ones.
sounded too much like breathing.
He walked
Every
past the
shadow
closet
looked like
once,
a figure standing
paused,
just out of reach.
then turned back.
I kept the wrench on my
I could see
nightstand
his
like a
shadow
weapon.
through the slats of the door.
On Sunday,
tall,
Daniels
wearing
called.
some kind of hood.
We pulled
I held
prints
my
from
breath
the door.
as his hand touched
no
the
matches
closet
in the
knob.
system.
It
Whoever it
turned
was,
halfway,
they've done this before.
then
Careful
stopped.
type. Maybe casing
Somewhere
other garages.
outside, a police siren wailed.
That didn't make me
The
feel
shadow
better.
turned, moving fast
It
toward
made me
the back
realize
of the
how
house.
close I'd
I
come
heard the
to
window
disappearing
shatter,
into
the
those
rush of
woods
cold
like the
air,
footprints.
then nothing.
When I
When
finally
officers
went back to work
arrived
Monday,
minutes later,
I couldn't
I
shake
was still
the feeling
hiding
of
in that
being
closet,
watched.
shaking.
The
They
cameras
searched the
were
whole
fixed,
house,
but every
nothing.
time I glanced at the
But the
monitor,
back window was open.
I half expected that
Footprints
leading
leading
away
away
through
through
the
the
frost
frost
to appear behind
and
me
halfway
again.
down the block. They
Sometimes
simply
I think
ended.
I saw a movement
No
in the
trail,
reflection of a
no
hubcap
sign of
or
where
the
he'd
sheen of a
gone.
windshield.
I moved
It
out
wasn't
within a
ghosts I
week.
was afraid of.
The landlord
It was the
didn't
kind
even
of
argue. He said he'd
patience
had other
on that real
complaints
people
from
have.
tenants before.
The kind that waits.
It's been 6
learns your
months
schedule,
now.
studies
I still
your
live in the
habits.
same town, but
That
I don't
night I
drive
kept
down
the main
Willow
lights
Lane
on.
anymore.
I didn't
Some
listen to
nights
the
when it
radio.
gets cold, I still dream
And when I
about the
locked
sound
up,
of those footsteps
I checked
circling
every
the
door
house.
twice.
Jenna
A week
won't talk
passed
about
before
it.
things felt normal
The
again.
police closed the case.
Business picked up,
But
and the story
sometimes
faded into
I
local
check the
gossip.
local news.
Daniel
Last
stopped
week a
by
report
once to
came
tell
out.
me they found a burned
Another
out
woman a
campfire
few
in the
streets
woods
over
behind
found
the shop.
fresh handprints on her
Empty
windows
food
after a
cans,
night of frost.
cigarette butts,
They
and a
said
pair
it
of
must have
worn-out
been
boots.
condensation.
Whoever had been
Maybe
watching
it
me had
was.
stayed close.
Or maybe
Maybe
he's still
living
out
there
there,
for days.
waiting for another
I
quiet
still
house.
think about that sometimes.
Another empty weekend.
How long they were
Another
out there
person
waiting
who
for
thinks
me
the
to make
knocks
one
are just the
mistake.
wind.
If I hadn't
Never
heard
ignore
that
your
tire
instincts.
roll, if I
Kindness,
hadn't turned around
logic,
at the
and
right
reason
second,
are all powerful.
maybe the story would have ended
But when
differently.
something deep inside you whispers,
Now every night when I lock the
something
garage,
isn't
I
right,
glance at the cameras one
you
last
must
time
listen.
and say out loud,
because
"We're
sometimes
closed."
danger doesn't roar.
It's stupid.
It waits quietly
But it
outside,
makes me feel like I'm talking
knocking
to
just
whoever
loud
might still
enough
be
for you to
listening.
hear.
And when the wind pushes at that back door, I don't brush it off anymore. I never used to believe in ghosts. Not the kind that float through walls
They
or
say
whisper
New York
in
never
empty
sleeps.
rooms, but the kind that
Maybe
live
that's
in
true
you,
for the tourists
made
or
of
the
guilt,
yellow cabs
memory,
or the neon
and the
signs
things
that
you never
blink
said.
long after midnight.
It was
But for
November when
people
I
like
came
me,
back to Astoria,
young,
Oregon,
broke,
after nearly 10
and
years
just
trying to
away.
make rent. The air there has
It
a way of
does
cutting
sleep.
straight through you, wet
It
and
sleeps in
cold from
quiet
the mouth
corners,
of the Columbia
in
River.
empty streets.
I'd
In
worked on
those
docks
hours
all
when the
my
world
life.
feels half dead
First
and
as
you
a
start to hear
deckhand,
your own heartbeat
then
in
hauling
the
freight.
silence.
When my mother
My
died,
name's
I told
Carrie.
myself I'd settle her
Ella
affairs,
Monroe.
stay a few weeks, and then
And
head
I've lived
south
in the
again.
city long enough to know
But
that
Oregon
silence
has
isn't
this way
always
of keeping
peaceful.
you. holding
Sometimes
you,
it's
and
the
damp
loudest
hands
thing
until
you'll
you
ever
forget
hear.
you ever planned to leave.
I moved here
The
right
rusted
after
lanterns
college,
chasing
chasing
the
the
kind
kind
of dream they sell
a
you
low
in
slum
glossy
bar with a
magazines,
flickering sign and a
single
publishing
jukebox
job,
that
a
hadn't
walk-up
played since the
apartment,
90s,
endless coffee, and
I
maybe
didn't
a
plan to
cat.
go in that night.
I got all of that.
My shift
Except
had run
the cat.
long, and I just wanted
What I
a
didn't
drink
expect
before
was
heading
how
to my
lonely it
motel.
could get once the novelty
But when
wore
I saw
off.
the lights still
My
burning
friends
past
had
midnight,
scattered.
I
My
thought,
parents were 2
why not?
states away,
and my
Inside
neighbors
smelled
were
of
ghosts
wet wood,
with Wi-Fi,
whiskey,
that
and the
night,
faint tang of salt.
The night everything changed.
The bartender,
I stayed late at the
a woman
office.
in her 50s with
We
dark
were closing
hair,
a campaign,
and
I didn't notice how
entered.
late it had gotten until the
Haven't
cleaning
seen you
crew
in
started
years, she said,
vacuuming around my
smiling.
desk. I frowned. When I finally left,
You
the
must have
subway
me
was half
confused
empty
with someone else.
I took the
First
L
time
train
here.
to Bedford. She tilted her head but didn't
Same
argue.
as always,
Just poured me
clutching
my
whiskey.
tote bag like a lifeline.
I sat near the middle of the bar.
I remember thinking about
There was
leftover
one
Thai
other
food
man,
waiting in the
a
fridge.
shape, really.
How I'd
Down
microwave
at the
it and
far
watch
end.
reruns until
Navy
I passed
coat
out.
pulled tight.
Face
Normal
hidden
thoughts.
under the shadow of
Harmless
his brim.
thoughts.
He was humming something
The
low.
walk from the subway to my
Something
apartment
that might
was
have
just
been a
5
sea
blocks.
shanty, but it always
The kind
stretched longer
old-timers
after
used to
midnight.
sing on the
The
trawlers.
city changed character
When I looked
at that
up again,
hour. He was staring right
street
at me.
lights buzzed
He
instead
tapped
of
a rhythm
shone.
on the counter.
Alleys breathed.
5 slow
and every
knocks.
sound felt sharper.
Tap. The
Tap.
slap of my sneakers
Tap.
on the pavement.
Tap.
The hum of a
Tap.
distant car.
You made
The
it
rustle
home,
of
didn't
plastic
you?
bags
He
in the
said.
gutter. His voice was rough.
Halfway down
like
the
a
second
rope
block,
dragged through
I
sand.
noticed it. Not
A street
everyone
light
did.
flickering ahead of me. Before I could
Sputters
respond,
like it
couldn't make
the
up its
lights
mind
flickered.
whether to live or die.
The hum
of the old beer cooler
beneath
stopped
it,
for a moment.
a man
And in that heartbeat of darkness, he stood perfectly
The man
still.
vanished.
Hands clasped
His stool
behind his
sat
back.
empty.
Facing
drink
the street
sweating on the
like he was
counter.
waiting for someone.
The bartender looked up from polishing a
something.
glass.
His
You
clothes
okay,
were
hun?
dark. His
I
face
turned to
half
her.
hidden in shadow.
That guy who was sitting
I
here.
couldn't make out
Where'd he
details,
go?
but something about his stillness was
blinked.
wrong.
What guy?
People on city streets move.
I stared at the empty
They smoke,
stool.
check their phones,
Tall,
shift weight,
navy coat.
He didn't. Was just here. I crossed to the
She
other
shook her
side,
head
pretending
slowly.
to scroll through my phone, but I
Sweetheart,
could feel his gaze.
You're my
The
only
hairs
customer
on my neck
tonight.
stood up, and when I passed the light
Outside,
his
the
shadow
wind
stretched
howled down
across
from
the
the
street,
river.
long and
I
thin,
drained the whiskey
reaching
and
for
left
mine.
without another word.
I quickened my pace.
The next morning, I
The
woke to
keys were
sirens.
already in my hand,
The
clenched
sound
tight.
carried through the motel's
By the time I
thin
reached my
walls,
building,
bouncing
my
off the
pulse
mist
was
heavy
racing.
air.
I turned
When I
once
stepped
just to make
outside,
sure. A police cruiser
street
tore
light
past
flickered
toward
again,
the docks,
and
red
he was
lights
gone.
smearing across the fog.
Relief hit me like a wave, and
Curiosity
I
got the better of
One
me.
of those nervous, shaky
I walked down
laughs
to the
that
pier
don't
9.
sound like you.
The tide was
Probably
high,
just
slapping
some
against
guy
the
waiting for
pilings
a
like
ride, I
impatient
told
hands.
myself.
A small
Small
crowd
crowd
had
wandered
gathered
too far from
dock
a bar.
workers, a few locals,
City weirdness.
all quiet. I
Nothing
saw the
more.
sheriff's men hauling something
Then I
out
saw
of the
my
water.
door.
It was
Someone
a
had
body,
carved something into
bloated,
the wood, the marks
pale,
fresh and uneven,
tangled in seaweed.
It took me a moment to
Even
understand
from a
what I was
distance,
looking
I
at.
recognized the navy
A
coat.
street light.
Fisherman.
Beneath it,
Someone
my
murmured
name.
beside me. Went
Ella.
missing 2 nights ago.
Etched
Poor
deep
bastard.
and clean.
2
The
nights ago.
grooves
Glowing faintly
But the
under
man
the
I'd
yellow
seen
bulb
was
outside.
alive.
Talking,
I
breathing,
dropped my keys.
tapping that strange rhythm
The
on
next
the bar.
morning,
I convinced
when the
myself it
sheriff
had to
turned
be
the
a party
prank,
over. I saw
maybe
his
the
face.
neighborhood kids,
The same one I'd
maybe
seen
one
the
of my
night
neighbors
before.
thought it was funny.
I felt the ground tilt
Still,
beneath me. When I looked at the carving in
that
daylight,
evening,
my stomach
I went
twisted.
back to the rusted
The etching
lantern.
was too deliberate, too
The
precise.
same
bartender was there, though
The
she
wood
didn't
was
greet me
gouged
this time.
deep.
She just
Not
gave
like
me
a
a
key or
wary
a
look
coin
and
could
poured a
have done
whiskey without asking.
More like a knife.
You heard about the fisherman? I took a
said.
photo and
She
sent it to my
nodded.
super. Everyone has. Mr. Vargas.
Shame about Jack.
With a message.
Jack? Jack Turner.
Someone vandalized my
Used to
door
come in
last
here
night.
every
Can you
night
check
till
the
his
security
boat went under
cameras?
last week.
He didn't
My
reply
hand
right
froze
away.
around the glass.
He never did.
His boat?
The man treated text messages
Yeah.
like ransom
The
notes.
Marion Rose.
I left for work without
Found
him
him
this
this
morning
morning
near the mouth of the
jumped
river.
at
Small noises on the
I
subway
hesitated.
and kept scanning
I saw
faces
him
in
here
the
last
crowd.
night.
Every bald head
She
or
looked at
dark
me like
coat
she
was
was
deciding
him.
whether I was joking. The man
That
under the
can't be.
streetlight. Jack's been dead
That'd be
the
a
office.
week.
My coworker. I didn't answer. Lydia.
Outside,
Noticed something was
wind
off.
rattled the sign.
You look like you didn't
bar
sleep.
felt colder
she
now,
said, stirring
emptier.
her coffee. I could almost
I
hear the
didn't,
5
I
knocks
admitted.
again, faint but steady.
What's wrong?
Like a heartbeat
I
beneath the
hesitated.
floor. Telling her felt ridiculous.
Over the
next few days, I couldn't
Weird
shake the
vibes
feeling
walking
that
home
something
last
was
night.
watching me. She smiled.
Every night I'd dream
a mix
of
of
water,
sympathy and
black
city
waves,
waves,
caution.
rope burns on my hands.
Girl,
Someone
get a
calling my
rideshare.
name through the fog.
It's 2025.
The same rhythm. No one walks
Always.
home alone at 1 a.m. anymore. 5 knocks. I laughed it off, but her words stuck.
I went down to the pier
Still
one
that
night,
night I took
long
the same
after
route.
dark.
Force of
The tide
habit
was
was low,
stubbornness.
exposing the rocks beneath
Maybe
the
I wanted
docks.
to prove to myself that
I brought a
wasn't
flashlight
scared.
and a bottle of whiskey. When
Foolish
I turned onto
comforts.
my street, the light was still
That's when I saw
flickering.
him again.
But the man wasn't there.
Standing near the edge.
Instead, something else
Coat
was.
dripping wet.
A folded piece
Eyes
of
dark
paper
as
tied
tape
to my
pools.
door, fluttering in the wind.
You made it home.
My name written
He said.
across it in blocky letters.
But not everyone did.
I tore it down, my chest
heart
hammering, and unfolded it.
What are you talking about?
Inside, one
He pointed
sentence.
toward the river mouth.
You look better
were
in the
there.
dark. The night we went under.
I called the police that night,
and then
they
I
took a
remembered.
report.
Asked
A year
routine
before
questions.
I left Oregon, there'd been a
Did
storm.
you see who left it?
4 of us had
No.
gone out on a small trawler.
Any enemies?
Jack
Exes?
Turner,
Co-workers?
me,
No.
and 2 others.
They promised to
We
send a
shouldn't have
car
gone.
around the neighborhood.
The storm
But I
came
knew how
fast,
that worked.
and the
No
waves
one
hit
was
harder
coming
than
unless
anything I'd
someone
ever
got hurt.
seen. Mr. Vargas finally texted back the next morning. I managed to cling to a buoy until cameras were out. Power issue. The others weren't so lucky. Sorry. I'd buried that night so deep it was like Friday I'd stopped sleeping. But every Jack creak of the pipes, every footstep in the hall made me flinch. I tried to save you. I taped over the peephole and pushed my dresser against the door. Then why'd you run? My phone stayed beside my bed. The next morning, flashlight at my resignation at the dock. Saturday night, the foreman didn't ask something new. He just nodded like he understood. People in towns like this don't cry. Metal coming from the hallway. I went back to the rusted lantern. I held my breath, straining to listen. The bartender slid a drink my way without a word. I opened my door just a crack. You look better. The hallway was empty. Like you finally got some sleep. Was another note. Maybe I did. Smile for the light. Or maybe I just slammed the door. Called Lydia. That night, I walked down to the river. Stood on the voicemail that was more like Jack's body had been found. Then I called my mom, pretending everything was still. Silver. I didn't want her to worry. I poured the whiskey into the river and whispered, asked the deli guy downstairs if he'd seen anyone hanging around. The wind shifted, tall, carrying the smell of salt and rain. Yeah. Somewhere in the distance, I heard standing under the streetlight out front across the docks. Didn't move for like an hour. I didn't turn around. Gave me chills. Some debts can't be repaid and walked home with a police report clutched in my purse. Grief doesn't always come from wondering why nobody else cared as much as I did. It can come from losing yourself to the guilt of survival. It was raining that Tuesday. You can't outrun what haunts you. Rain that made the streetlight glow like ocean gold. Not in the quiet. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. Sometimes the only way forward is to face the ghosts explained away. Not to banish them, but deep down, but to understand what they're trying to tell you. He was watching. When I reached my building, the light above the stoop passed away. I didn't expect to inherit anything more than a few dusty photo albums and her cat Jasper standing beneath it again. But a few weeks after the funeral, clasped behind his back, the lawyer called and told me she'd left her old countryside home on Wren Hill. Same frozen stance. It wasn't much. I forced my voice house with peeling paint and ivy creeping up the sides. He smiled, but it had slow and deliberate. She'd lived there since before I was born, he said softly, tending her garden, now the dark walks with you, and keeping to herself after my uncle died. Up the stairs, I visited her a few times as a kid, slamming the door but I remembered the place mostly for its stillness. I didn't stop shaking for an hour, the kind that made you whisper. When I finally dared to look through the window, I was 32, but on the glass, laid off from my job in the city, and not exactly swimming in options under the light. So when the idea of house sitting for a few months came up, packed everything I owned into boxes and begged Lydia to help me find a sublet. Yes. She didn't argue. I figured I'd use the time to get my head straight. Maybe start painting again. The last night in that apartment, I stood by the door one final time. The carving was still there. The morning smelled like pine and wet earth. I traced my fingers over it by the window, wondering who he was, drift through the trees that lined the edge of the property. Found someone new to watch. The nearest town was a 15-minute hallway lights flickered, and the only neighbor I had was an older man named at the far end, Mr. Reeves. I didn't look about half a mile down the gravel road. Trust your instincts. He stopped by especially one morning to drop off some fresh in familiar places. Friendly guy. Quiet. The world's dangers don't always come crashing in with noise and violence. Margaret was a good woman. Sometimes they wait quietly under the streetlights watching. Always kept to herself. Never ignore that quiet voice inside. You staying here long? That tells you to turn around just a few months early or cross the street. I told him. Awareness can save your life till I figure out what's next. Can invite the dark to follow you home. He nodded slowly, eyes drifting toward the house. You'll find the nights get real long out here. When I bought my house on Maple Street 8 years ago, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. With me longer than it should have. A quiet neighborhood, the days between the river and the highway, far enough from downtown to escape Jasper through the overgrown garden for a 20-minute commute. Then about a week in, I was 29. Stopped by again. A maintenance tech for the city. Thought you should know. The kind of guy who fixed other people's problems, but never had much excitement of his own. I saw someone in your upstairs window next to an old boarding house, maybe a 3-story relic from the 1940s. I frowned. It had probably just a reflection. Crooked shutters move in the breeze, and a wraparound porch that sagged in the middle. Just gave me a look that said he wasn't so mostly empty. Except night I left every light on and stayed a few months and vanished. For the next few days I couldn't shake the thought. Mr. Gibson was an older man. Every flicker of shadow made me turn my head. Lawn. I told myself it was just old house noises. Wood expanding, the place. Pipes breathing, the kind of sounds you forget to notice when you've lived in a city full of noise. Drinking my morning coffee in the kitchen. But on the fifth night something happened. From my window I could see one of its upper rooms. I just brushed my teeth and leaned over to rinse when I caught movement in the mirror behind me. And I got used to that particular stillness where even the hum of my refrigerator felt the bathroom door. Then, early one March evening, I saw movement next door for the first time in months. I called out. A pickup truck idled out front from the hallway, its headlights cutting through the dusk. Looking up at me like I'd interrupted his evening routine. Tall, maybe
mid-40s,
nervously,
wearing a gray
coat
and
and carrying a single box.
But sleep didn't come
no
easy.
movers, no furniture.
The walls groaned
just
with
that
every
box.
gust of wind.
I watched
And
him
at one
climb
point
the
I
porch
swore
steps and
I heard
disappear
the sound
inside.
of footsteps upstairs.
I remember thinking,
I grabbed the flashlight from the
Finally,
nightstand and crept
someone
up the
brave enough to
staircase.
rent that place again.
The air grew colder with
Over
each
the next
step.
few nights,
I
the
checked
lights in
every
the
room.
upstairs room
Nothing
came
out
on.
of place.
Then they
No
didn't.
open windows.
Then they
no
did
broken
again.
locks.
Faint and
Still,
yellow, like an
I couldn't
old
shake the
bulb
feeling
struggling
that I
to
wasn't
stay alive.
alone. The
I
next
glanced
morning,
up from washing
when I walked
dishes
into
and
the
see him
kitchen,
standing there,
3 drawers were
perfectly
open.
still at the window, looking
Just
straight
slightly.
toward my kitchen.
I hadn't
At
touched
first,
them
I
since
figured
the
it
night
was
before.
coincidence.
I
Maybe
closed
our
them,
routines just
telling
lined up.
myself I'd left them
Both
like
of us
that.
staring
But
absent-mindedly
later
out
that
windows
day,
after work.
they were open again.
But after a week,
By the second
it
week, the
stopped
house
feeling
felt
like
heavier,
coincidence.
like it was
He never
watching me.
moved, never used
I
his
started
phone,
hearing noises
never
above
looked
the
anywhere
ceiling.
else.
Soft
Always watching.
shuffling sounds.
The human brain
I
is
figured
good
it
at
was
making
raccoons
excuses.
or squirrels.
Mine came
Maybe
up
a
with
nest.
plenty. Maybe he
So
was
I called
shy.
a pest control
Maybe
guy,
he was depressed.
but he couldn't come
Maybe
until
he
the
liked the
weekend.
view of my backyard maple
That
tree.
night,
The noises
still
every
came back.
evening around 9 when I switched
Louder
on my
this
kitchen
time.
light. He was there.
Footsteps.
Same spot.
Real
same
measured
shadowed
footsteps.
face. I
I
tried
turned
to
off the
ignore it.
TV and listened
I'd pull the
hard pounding.
blinds, but curiosity is
They
a cruel
stopped.
habit.
Then,
After a few minutes, I'd
3
peek
slow
again, and
steps.
sure enough, he hadn't budged.
I grabbed the flashlight
The
again,
window between
went
us
to the
felt like a
hallway,
two-way
and
mirror.
stared at the ceiling hatch that led
A
to the
Friday
attic.
night in April,
The
I
pull
decided
strings
to break
swayed
the tension.
faintly, though
I
the air
raised
was
my
still.
mug in a mock toast.
Hello?
Half smiling.
I said.
No response.
No answer.
Not
I
even a
climbed
tilt
up
of the
halfway,
head.
shining the light through
The
the
light
gap.
behind him flickered once,
Dust
twice,
swirled
then
in
went
the
out
beam.
completely.
Cobwebs,
My own reflection
old
stared
boxes,
back at me in the dark
nothing
glass.
else.
I
Then
slept
something
poorly
small
that night.
rolled toward me.
Around 3
A
a.m.,
flashlight.
I woke to a soft
It hit the floor near
tap,
my foot.
Tap.
I scrambled
tap
down,
at my
slammed
back
the
door.
hatch shut, and didn't sleep the rest
At first,
of the
I
night.
thought it was branches in the
By
wind.
morning, I'd had enough.
Then it came again.
I called Mr. Reeves,
3 slow
told him
taps,
what I'd heard.
like knuckles on wood.
He showed up within the hour.
My dog, Rufus,
shotgun slung over
lifted
his shoulder.
head and whimpered.
Probably a
I
drifter.
grabbed the
he
flashlight
said.
and crept downstairs.
Happens sometimes.
The kitchen clock
Empty
glowed
houses attract the
3:14.
wrong kind.
My heart hammered so
We
loud
went
it
up
drowned
together,
out everything else.
flashlight beams
I
cutting through
swung
the
open
dark.
the door in one motion.
That's when we found
Beams
it.
slicing through the
A
yard.
makeshift bed,
Nothing.
blankets,
No footprints
pillow,
on the deck.
a
No
few
wind,
empty water bottles,
No rain.
food wrappers
Just
scattered
stillness.
nearby.
When I looked
Someone
up,
had
the
been
boarding
living
house
there.
window blinked to life.
The air was
Light
ice cold,
flickering, still
carrying
curtains
the
swaying
faint scent
slightly.
of cigarettes.
I stood there
Then I
shivering,
saw
though
it.
the air was warm.
A metal vent
Feeling
cut
like
into
the world
floor,
had tilted
wide
half
enough
an
for
inch
someone
off
to
center.
crawl through.
By morning,
It
I
led
was
straight
done
down to
pretending
my
it was
bedroom
harmless.
closet.
I marched
Mr.
next
Reeves
door.
cursed under his
The porch
breath.
groaned under my boots.
I'll call the
smell
sheriff,
of dust
he
thick in
said.
the air. The
I
door was
nodded,
padlocked.
but my eyes were fixed
"Hey!"
on that vent.
I shouted, pounding the
The metal
frame.
was still warm.
You think it's funny messing
I
with
didn't
people
wait.
in the middle of the night?
I grabbed my keys.
Silence.
Jasper under
I
one
circled
arm
the house
and
and
checked
ran.
the driveway.
I didn't
No
even
truck,
stop
no
to
tire
tap.
marks.
By the
The
time
only
I hit the
movement
gravel
came from a
road,
loose shutter
Mr.
banging
Reeves
softly
was
against the
already on the
siding.
phone with the police.
A neighbor walking her
They
dog
searched the
slowed when
property
she
for
saw me.
hours. When they
You looking
finally
for somebody?
came back down from the attic, the
Yeah,
sheriff's
the new
face
tenant
was pale.
moved in last week.
The bedding's
She
still
frowned.
warm, he said
Honey,
quietly.
nobody's lived there for months.
Whoever it was,
Places for
they were
sale.
here when you
Didn't
went
you
up.
see the sign?
I moved out
I
that
hadn't,
night.
but there it was.
A week later,
half
I
hidden
drove
behind
back
a
with
lilac
Mr.
bush
Reeves
to pick up a few things.
for sale.
The house
Gibson
looked
Realty,
smaller in daylight, almost
in fading
harmless.
blue paint.
But when we walked
I
past
called
the
Mr.
attic
Gibson's
hatch, I
number from
noticed
the
the
sign.
pull string was gone. He picked up on the second
Cut
ring,
clean
sounding
off.
groggy.
I didn't go inside
Mr.
again.
Gibson, it's just sometimes the
from next
scariest
door.
stories aren't about
Did
ghosts
someone
at
rent
all.
the upstairs?
They're about people. What? No.
We tell ourselves houses
empty
creak
since
and
December.
shadows
lie. I hesitated.
But real danger doesn't always
I've
hide
been
in the
seeing
dark.
someone in the window. Sometimes.
It
He
hides in
exhaled
plain
sharply,
sight.
just above
Son,
your head.
That house doesn't
Always
have power.
trust what feels
They
wrong.
shut it off 3 months
because
ago.
sometimes the house is
I
watching.
thanked him and hung up,
my fingers trembling. If there was no power,
They say
how had the
nothing
light
good happens
flickered?
after midnight.
That
Especially
night,
on the back
I tried
roads
to
of
tell myself
Wisconsin.
it was reflection.
I used to laugh at
Street
that.
light.
Until
Passing
that
car,
November night when I found
imagination.
out how true it could be.
But as darkness fell,
the
I
weekend
couldn't
had
stop
started
glancing
simply
toward
enough.
that window. My parents
It
lived
remained
out near
dark,
Eau Claire,
and I
empty.
hadn't been home since late summer.
For the first time in weeks,
Mom
I
had
felt
made her
relief
usual overcooked roast
until
beef,
Rufus
and Dad
started
had fallen
growling
asleep
at the
in
kitchen
front of the
door.
TV before dessert.
I turned off the TV.
It was comforting in a way,
falling into an
like
uneasy
stepping back
quiet.
into a quieter, slower
Rufus
version
stood
of my
rigid,
life.
ears forward.
When I
eyes
left that
locked
Sunday
on the
night,
window
the air
above
already
sink.
smelled like snow.
Easy,
I could have
buddy,
stayed till morning,
I whispered.
but I wanted to get back to my apartment
stepped
before
closer,
work, heart thudding. The drive was 3
The
hours.
backyard was a pool of
mostly
darkness.
through empty farmland
Nothing
and
moved.
2-lane highways that
My
cut
own
through
reflection
patches of
hovered in
forest.
the glass.
I'd done it
Pale,
100 times
tired,
before. Ridiculous for
the first
myself.
hour, everything was fine.
Then the reflection shifted.
Classic rock humming from the
Someone
radio.
else was there,
A thermos
just behind
of
my
gas
shoulder.
station coffee in the cup holder.
A shape,
the rhythmic
tall and
flash
thin.
of mile markers passing
My breath
by.
hitched.
Then
I
the
spun
fog
around.
started. Empty
At
kitchen.
first, just a thin mist
No
rising
sound,
off the
but
fields.
Rufus's whine.
Then thicker.
When I
heavier,
turned back, the reflection
until
was
it began
gone.
swallowing the
But
headlights
the faint
whole.
outline of a handprint
The
smeared
radio
the
started
inside of the
crackling
glass.
like I was driving through
Inside.
static. The
I stumbled
GPS on my
backward,
phone
knocking over a
flickered
chair.
once, twice.
Adrenaline
then
surged.
froze.
Logic drowned.
I slowed down to 30.
I grabbed my
leaning
phone,
forward over
dialed
the wheel,
911,
my eyes
and told
straining
the
to make
dispatcher
out the
someone
white
was in my
lines on the
house.
pavement.
Officers arrived
couldn't
10
shake
minutes
the
later,
feeling
swept
that the
every
world
room,
had gone
found
smaller.
nothing. No
Like
forced
the fog
entry,
was
no
no just
footprints.
weather, but a wall
One of them
closing
gave me
in.
that look people reserve for
That's
the
when I
half-crazy.
saw her.
Probably
woman
just
standing
light
on the shoulder
distortion,
of the
he said,
road, waving one arm
happens
above
with
her
double
head.
pane windows.
She was next to a dark
Distortion
sedan
doesn't
with
leave
its hood
handprints,
up.
I muttered.
Hazard lights blinking
After they
weakly
left,
through
I
the
scrubbed
fog.
the glass clean.
I
Locked
hesitated.
every door
It
and
was
left every
late.
light on. The highway was empty.
Sleep never came.
Every
Days
instinct told me
passed
to
without
keep
incident.
driving. The for
But my
sale
dad
sign
had raised
stayed
me to help
planted in the
people who were
neighbor's yard.
stranded. I
Small
started
town
convincing
decency
myself
drilled
it had
into
been
me
stress,
since I was old enough
lack
to
of
drive.
sleep, shadows
I
playing
slowed
tricks.
down and pulled over a few yards ahead of her.
Then one night in May,
As soon as I
came
stopped,
home late from a
the
double
radio
shift.
cut out completely.
The kitchen lights were off.
When I stepped out,
I must have
the
forgotten
cold
to leave
hit
them
like
on.
a slap. I set my
My
keys
breath
down,
came out in
crossed
short,
the dark
white
room, and
clouds.
something stopped me cold.
The woman was maybe in her 30s,
In the black
pale,
reflection of the
with
window,
long hair that looked
a face
almost
stared
silver in the
back.
fog.
She
Not
wore
mine.
a light jacket,
The same
way too
gray-coated
thin
man.
for the cold, eyes hollow,
Ma'am?
expression
I called
unreadable.
out, trying to sound calm.
On his side of the glass,
You
the
okay?
faint outline of
Car
my
trouble?
kitchen glowed behind
She
him.
turned slowly,
as if
her expression
he were
unreadable.
inside.
Thank
and I were
God,
the one
she
outside
said.
looking in.
Her voice was steady.
The light in the boarding
not
house
panicked,
flickered
not
once
relieved,
more across the
just
yard,
even.
echoing like distant
I've been here for
lightning.
hours. No one's
When
come
it
by.
steadied, the window was
I
empty.
glanced around. I
The road
moved out
behind us
the
was
next
empty,
week.
vanishing into the
Sometimes
fog
the
like it had
scariest
been
things
erased.
aren't supernatural.
What happened?
They're the moments
I
when
asked.
reality itself blurs.
Engine died,
and we
she
ignore
said.
what our instincts are
It just
screaming.
stopped. I don't
Trust
have
what you
service.
see and feel.
I
Even
can
when
call
others
someone for you.
dismiss it. I offered,
Awareness
reaching
is the
for my
thin
phone.
glass between safety and
That's
danger.
when she said it, and once it
Softly,
cracks,
no
almost
amount
like she
of
was
light
talking
can make
to
you
herself.
unsee what's been staring back
He doesn't
all
like
along.
that. I froze.
Sorry.
Who doesn't? She didn't answer. Her
Most
eyes
people think
flicked past
stores
me,
shut down when the
over
last
my
customer
shoulder,
leaves,
like she was
But
watching
that's when
something
the real
move
work
behind me.
begins.
I turned,
I
scanning
was
the
26
fog.
when I joined the overnight
Nothing.
cleaning crew at the
Just
Target
the
off
faint
Route
hiss of wind
17.
and my own heartbeat
The pay
pounding
wasn't
in my
great,
ears.
but it covered my
When I
rent
turned
and
back,
gave me hours
she
that
was
fit around
smiling
community
faintly.
college classes.
A small, polite smile
Nights
like
there
she
were
knew
strange.
something I didn't.
Half alive,
Your car's
half
still
dead.
running, she said.
All the red and white of
You
the
should keep it
daytime
that
hustle
way.
turned dull and echoing
Something
after
about
midnight.
her calmness made my stomach
There were 6
twist.
of us on staff
I
that
wanted
night
to
crew.
leave,
But
me,
politeness,
Luis the floor
or
tech,
stupidity,
Sharon the
kept me
supervisor,
standing there,
and a few temps who
Then
rotated
I
every
noticed
week.
the ground near her
We
car.
clocked in at 10 p.m.
Footprints, right after
2
the
sets,
evening manager locked
one
the doors.
leading from the driver's door to
Once
where she
those heavy
stood,
red doors
the
latched,
other circling
it
around
felt
my
like the
car.
world outside disappeared.
Did someone else stop
No
before
customers,
me?
no noise.
I asked
Just
carefully.
the hum of machines and the
Her
sound of
smile
our
didn't
own
fade.
footsteps.
He's
I
still
liked the
here.
solitude at first,
And then,
the big box
from
aisles
somewhere in
felt
the fog
endless.
behind me, I heard
like
a
empty
sound.
streets in a quiet
The
town.
metallic click of my trunk
Sometimes I'd
ledge.
plug in my earbuds,
Every muscle
push
in my
the
body
vacuum,
locked up,
and pretend I was
spun
anywhere
around,
else.
knife-edge adrenaline surging through
That
me.
night was a Wednesday.
The fog was so thick
late
now
October.
I couldn't see more than 10 feet.
Rain hammered the roof
My
like
headlights
gravel,
carved out 2
and the
narrow
parking lot
cones of
lights
pale
flickered
yellow,
against puddles.
but they hit nothing.
It was the kind of
No
night
movement,
that made the store
no
feel
shapes.
even more isolated, like
Then
a
came
ship
another
at sea.
sound.
A low
By
scrape.
2 a.m.,
like the
boots
others
on
were
gravel.
finishing their sections.
I didn't think.
I
was
ran.
assigned to electronics.
I dove back
Flat
into the
screens,
driver's seat,
display phones,
slammed the door shut,
shelves of
and
video
hit the
games
locks
that always needed dusting.
My fingers shook so
The
hard I
vacuum
nearly
whirred
dropped beneath the
keys.
fluorescent buzz.
The woman hadn't moved.
I remember glancing at the
She
dark
was still
reflection
standing
in the
by her
TV
stalled
screens,
car, one hand
my
resting
own tired
lightly on the
face
hood,
staring
just
back
watching
at
me.
me. I yelled
Through
through
the
the closed
faint
window.
and clear,
I'm calling
came
the
the
cops.
sound of a scanner.
But even
beeping.
as I said it, I
That
knew I
sharp
wouldn't.
electronic
Not until I
chirp
was
from the
miles
front
away.
registers.
I jammed the
froze.
car into drive, and floor
That
noise only happened
the
when
tires
something
spat
was
gravel
scanned
as I
at
tore
checkout.
away.
But the
fog
registers were
swallowing
off
the red
after
blink of
midnight.
her hazards behind me. Luis, for a few seconds,
I called out.
All I could
pulling
hear
my
was my
earbuds
own
free.
ragged breathing and the
You
hum
restocking
of the
up
engine.
front?
The fog
No
pressed
answer.
against the windshield
Just
like
the
it was
steady
trying to
hum
get
of the
in.
ceiling vents.
Then from the
I
back
told
seat,
myself
something
it was the
shifted.
system glitching.
A soft,
The scanner
slow
sometimes
movement.
made noise during maintenance.
Fabric against
But
fabric.
when it beeped again, three
My
short
heart
bursts
stopped.
in a row,
I
I
looked
felt
up
the
at the
hairs
rear
on my
view
arms
mirror.
rise.
Nothing.
I walked slowly out of
Just the
electronics,
dim outline of the
vacuum
backseat.
cord dragging behind me
Empty.
like a lifeline.
I told
The
myself
store
it was
stretched
my
quiet
jacket
and dim
sliding
toward the
off
registers.
seat. Rows of motionless mannequins and locked cases reflecting pale light again. Hello? It wasn't until I reached the gas station on the edge of town that I finally exhaled. Nothing. When I got out to pump gas, I checked the trunk abruptly, replaced by a low click from the overhead lights. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Half the store dimmed to energy-saving mode. The woman. It always happened automatically. Maybe the cold and exhaustion had gotten to me. But this time, the timing felt wrong. I wanted to believe that. Like the building itself was responding to what I saw when I got back into the car. I set the vacuum down and followed the passenger seatbelt. Each step was buckled, bouncing off the linoleum. I didn't sleep that night. My shoes squeaked on the floor outside my apartment. Laid down near cosmetics. A passing car. As I approached the front, I could see the red glow of the Target logo reflected on the glass doors. Charging beside me. The rows of checkout lanes stretched out before myself. I was quiet and empty. I went to work, then drank too much coffee. Tried to laugh it off when my coworker asked why I looked like I had far registers. But that caught it in the corner of my eye. The fog was back. Quick, thick, deliberate. Not the flicker of a light. Road, same pale glow in the headlights. I shouted, my voice cracking. Home, the radio started. You're not supposed to be in here. The same static. I waited and through it. Nothing answered. A woman's voice. The sound of my own breathing filled the silence. I thought of calling security. Hard, but the store didn't have overnight guards. There was no signal that far out. The cameras fed to a remote system that no one watched in real time. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. Another thought hit me harder. I saw the reflection. The doors were locked from the inside. In the glass of the windshield, no one was supposed to be able to get in after closing. Beads of moisture, unless a faint outline of a face behind mine. I turned and ran. The staff exiting near the stockroom was only 50 yards away, but those 50 yards felt and spun around. Every sound in that building seemed to chase me. The seat was empty. The hum of the lights, but the window glass behind me still held the shape of the rain outside slapping against the glass. Imprint. A faint trace of where her head had been. Slammed my ID badge against the panel. I drove the rest of the way home, shaking so badly I could barely keep the car on the road. Come on! I went to the police the next morning. I tried again. The officer behind the desk the door was lightly, but didn't write anything down. Sounds like you were tired, he said. The door automatically unlocked when the badge scanned. You probably stopped for someone who wasn't really there. Switched it manually. But the footprint pulse thudded in my ears, he said quickly. I could hear faint movement from somewhere deep in the store. The creak of a cart, feeling like a lunatic. That night, I couldn't stop replaying her words. Sharon, you there? He doesn't like that. No reply. Who was he? I didn't have an answer. Into the stockroom, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd brought something with me that night. Head high. My flashlight 2 days later through the dark. My neighbor knocked on my door. Fresh footprints in the dust. Hey man, he said, heavy. You left your trunk open. Not from any of our crew. My blood turned to ice. Then I saw it. I walked out to the parking lot next to the emergency door. The trunk was open. A pile of merchandise. Not wide, just tablets, headphones, cameras. Inside was nothing but my emergency blanket to carry them out. Sour smell. I crouched behind a stack of cardboard. Heart pounding. When I closed it, I caught my reflection in the glass. Was clear. And for a split second, they grabbed the stuff I saw another shape standing just behind me. I could hear soft footsteps now moving along the back wall. Male. Then silence. And in the reflection, then the faintest sound of breathing. Smiling was mine. The realization hit me like I traded the car in. Whoever it was, told the dealer I didn't care about the price. They weren't running from me. I walked away without looking back, waiting. But sometimes, when the weather turns cold and fog rolls across the fields, I edged toward the maintenance hallway, hoping to find the phone near the manager's office. Deliberate. The air felt heavier the farther I went, steady voice, like the store itself was holding its breath. He doesn't like that. When I reached the hallway corner, some warnings aren't meant to be ignored. The faint creak of a door Compassion is noble. I turned, but blind trust caught a glimpse of someone slipping out of sight. On empty roads and in lonely places, tall. Not every cry for help is what it seems. Stop! And not every passenger you pick up is alive. Weak. The emergency light above the door flickered once. I'd always liked long drives at night. There was something calming about the hum of the tires on the asphalt. My hand shook as I grabbed the desk narrow into that tunnel of headlights so fast I nearly missed the last November. The road operator's voice steadied me. Emptier. 911, what's your emergency? The radio crackled in and out. There's someone inside the Target on Route 17. I said, breathless. I'd been driving from Chicago to the cleaning crew, trying to clear my head after a breakup that had left me raw and restless. The line It wasn't dead. A spontaneous trip. Every light in the office went out. I planned the route, the stops. When the police finally arrived, the automatic doors have a way of prying open from the universe wants to test you. They found me crouched near the back office with a broken flashlight, then the dashboard lights flickered and the engine coughed once, twice. The intruder was gone and died. They searched the building. I coasted to the shoulder corner, cursed softly, and tried the ignition again. They found what I'd seen. Just the faint hiss of the wind pushing through the merchandise beside the emergency exit. I popped the hood even though I knew nothing about engines. Like they were here a while. The air smelled metallic and damp like rain that never came. Planning this for days. Steam rose from somewhere deep inside. How long they thought he'd been inside. My breath turned white in the cold. The answer still chills me. Perfect, I muttered. Based on the camera feed, the highway was silent, he said. No passing cars entered just after civilization in any direction. Stayed hidden the whole time. Just fog thick enough to trying to rob the store tonight. I checked my phone. Watched 2% battery, no signal. Walk the aisles. That's when I saw almost the faint red glow through the fog. After that night, sign, I quit the job weakly like a dying firefly. Couldn't walk through a store after dark without my chest tightening. Make out the word. Sometimes I still dream of that beeping scanner. I grabbed my bag in the trunk and started calling my name. The crunch of gravel under my boots was the only sound. Especially when something feels off in a place came into focus slowly. Safety isn't guaranteed just because you've walked the same aisles 100 times. In a row. And a sign that evil doesn't always burst through the door. Sunset Lodge. It waits quietly. The irony wasn't lost on me until you forget it. Inside the office, the air was stale. Never ignore the smallest warning. Dust and cigarettes. Sometimes that's all that stands between you and the counter that watches flipping through an old magazine. He looked up when the door creaked open. Car trouble? He asked. His voice was thin, wary. Yeah, I said. It died about a mile back. You got a phone I can use? I need a tow. He hesitated before nodding toward a dusty landline on the wall. Line's been acting up, he said. Storm last week messed with it. You can try, though. I picked